হ্যাঁ, নিয়াজ এখন একবারে মানে যতটা কোভিড স্মার্ট হইতে পারে
লাইভে চলে গেছি, সরি সরি,
লাইভে চলে গেছি,
আমরা লাইভে, সো লেটস স্টার্ট। আচ্ছা, তো আমরা শুরু করি। সবাইকে অনেক অনেক ধন্যবাদ এখানে যোগদান করার জন্য। আমাদের সাথে আসলে অনেক সাংবাদিক ভাই বোনেরা আছেন, তো আমরা চেষ্টা করব বাংলা এবং বিদেশিও কিছু আছেন, তো আমরা বাংলা ইংরেজি মিলিয়ে বলবো আমাদের আজকের মানে আলোচনা এবং প্রেজেন্টেশনটা খুব সম্ভবত ইংরেজিতেই হবে, কিন্তু আমরা আলোচনায় বাংলা ইংরেজি মিলিয়ে মানে আলোচনাটা করব। তো প্রথমে আমি পরিচয় করিয়ে দিতে চাচ্ছি আজকের যারা স্পিকার এবং প্যানেলিস্ট। প্রথমে আমার পরিচয়, আমার নাম ডক্টর ইমরান মতিন, আমি ব্র্যাক ইনস্টিটিউট অফ গভর্নেন্স অ্যান্ড ডেভেলপমেন্টের এক্সিকিউটিভ ডিরেক্টর। ব্র্যাক ইনস্টিটিউট অফ গভর্নেন্স অ্যান্ড ডেভেলপমেন্ট ব্র্যাক ইউনিভার্সিটির একটি প্রতিষ্ঠান, এবং আমরা মূলত গভর্নেন্স, শাসন ব্যবস্থা এবং উন্নয়ন, এই দুই বিষয় নিয়ে আমরা গবেষণা করি। আজকে আমাদের সাথে আমাদের মূল প্রেজেন্টার নিয়াজ আসাদুল্লাহ, ডক্টর নিয়াজ, প্রফেসর নিয়াজ আসাদুল্লাহ, প্রফেসর অফ ইকোনমিক্স, ইউনিভার্সিটি অফ মালয়। ডক্টর নিয়াজ এই স্টাডিটার প্রিন্সিপাল ইনভেস্টিগেটর হিসাবে কাজ করেছেন বিআইজিডির রিসার্চারদের সাথে। আমাদের প্যানেলিস্ট হিসাবে আছেন রাশেদা কে চৌধুরী, এক্সিকিউটিভ ডিরেক্টর ক্যাম্পে, প্রফেসর ডক্টর সৈয়দ গোলাম ফারুক, উনি যদিও এখন আসেননি, আশা করছি কিছুক্ষণের মধ্যে আসবেন, উনি ডিরেক্টর জেনারেল ডিরেক্টরেট অফ সেকেন্ডারি অ্যান্ড হায়ার এডুকেশন, উনি আমাদের সাথে যোগ দেবেন প্যানেলিস্ট হিসাবে। ডক্টর শফিকুল ইসলাম, ডিরেক্টর এডুকেশন ব্র্যাক, উনি আছেন, এবং ডক্টর মোহাম্মদ মাহবুব মোর্শেদ, উনি অ্যাসিস্ট্যান্ট প্রফেসর ব্র্যাক ইনস্টিটিউট অফ এডুকেশন ডেভেলপমেন্ট। এটা ব্র্যাক ইউনিভার্সিটির আরেকটি সিস্টার ইনস্টিটিউট, বিআইজিডির মতো আরেকটি ইনস্টিটিউট, ওনারা এডুকেশন নিয়ে মূলত কাজ করেন। তো আপনাদের সবাইকে স্বাগত। শুরু করার আগে আমি জাস্ট একটু ফ্রেম করতে চাচ্ছি পুরো জিনিসটা, প্রেজেন্টেশন আমি নিয়াজকে বলবো করার জন্য। প্রথমে বিআইজিডি ওয়েবিনারটা আসলে একটু অন্যান্য সমস্ত ওয়েবিনারের চেয়ে একটু ভিন্ন। আমরা বিআইজিডি ওয়েবিনারে কেবলমাত্র বিআইজিডি যেসব গবেষণার সাথে বিআইজিডি যেসব গবেষণা করছে সেই গবেষণাগুলো নিয়ে আমরা এই ওয়েবিনারগুলো অর্গানাইজ করি। এছাড়াও আরো অনেক ওয়েবিনার, হ্যাঁ সরি
আমাদের সাথে বেশ কয়েকজন মানে বিদেশি ফরেন আছেন আর কি, তা একটু যদি আপনি বাংলা ইংলিশ মিডিয়ে বলতেন তাহলে ভালো হতো তাদের জন্য।
আচ্ছা, দেখব। আচ্ছা, তো বিআইজিডি ওয়েবিনার যেটা বলছিলাম, এটা মূলত এটা বিআইজিডি রিসার্চ যেগুলো আমরা সেগুলোকে নিয়েই বিআইজিডি ওয়েবিনার গুলো অর্গানাইজ করি। এ পর্যন্ত আমরা 5-6টি ওয়েবিনার করেছি, এবং মূলত বিআইজিডি যে সব রিসার্চ করছে সেগুলোকে ডিসেমিনেট করার জন্যই আমরা বিআইজিডি ওয়েবিনারটা অর্গানাইজ করি। So a few other framing issues. First of all, I think it's really important to recognize that the crisis, the COVID crisis, is not only an economic and a governance and a health crisis, but it is also a human capital recovery crisis. So I think we're going to be really focusing on the human capital recovery challenge. And in particular, I think as the presentation will clearly show, that we are at a risk of a dual crisis in this human capital recovery challenge. There is a supply side issue, supply side challenge with respect to the human capital recovery. And with the human capital recovery, it is not only the schooling, and it is not only the secondary, primary, and tertiary, but it is also the skilling and the reskilling part is also part of the whole human capital recovery challenge. So human capital as a whole, we need to think. In this study, we are focusing primarily on older grade 4 to 10 and the recovery challenge in that context. And we have tried to focus on the demand side. And as we will argue that this particular aspect has been missing from the human capital recovery challenge. All the discussions on the education side until now have not really focused as much on the demand side, or if they have, it is not based on very robust data. That's exactly what we are trying to bring here. We will argue that on the demand side, there is a potential crisis in terms of the learning loss and a motivational decline, both of which can lead to pretty significant problems in terms of continuation and overall learning outcome later. So we will be talking about that. So what did we do? And we'll talk about that more, but let me just very quickly tell you, we did a survey focusing on grade 4 to grade 10, and we deliberately focused on slightly higher grade in the primary and in the secondary, because that is exactly where the learning vulnerability is going to be the deepest. Of course, other age groups are also very important, and there are other studies happening in sort of a younger age group. I think Brac Institute of Education and Development themselves, they have done work on the earlier age group. We are focused on a slightly older age group because we are interested in the learning outcomes and the learning issues. So we are primarily interested in this whole question from a human capital recovery point of view. So learning becomes our central thing that we are interested in. Of course, right now we cannot do a proper learning outcome survey. That is not what we did. Instead, we focused on the learning time use. So we did a learning time use survey looking at how children are using their time within the household, and we have used a shorter version of a time use survey, and we will talk a lot more about that. We surveyed 4,672 households, but actually we surveyed 9,865 individuals, because we surveyed the mothers and children, school-going children of grade 4 and grade 10 in those households. That gave us 9,865 interviews. So this has been a very extensive rural and urban survey. What we try to do here, and this is something that I think BIGD we are trying to really focus on, is that in this crisis period, we need data, evidence, and insights, and we need it rapidly. But that doesn't mean it has to be dirty. We can do rapid and good quality work, rapid, and that is also reliable. So, and I think the more we are challenging ourselves to meet the dual challenge of rapidity and reliability, we are learning actually we can do a lot, even in a rapid way with phone surveys and things like that. And there are very important methods, questions and methods issues that we are also learning as we do this work. Just to let you know very quickly that this survey that we have done right now is based on a much larger rural and urban slum survey that BIGD conducted in the earlier years. We did an urban slum census consisting of 24,283 households, from which we drew the urban sample in this case. And we also had a rural representative household survey consisting of 26,925 households, and we drew a rural sample from that. And as some of you would know, that our livelihood survey that we did in partnership with PPRC also used the same sample frame. So we are basically using the same sample frame to do a number of studies. I don't want to spoil the alert, spoil, the kind of, the findings, steal the thunder, but there are two major findings, and I think just wanted to, so you focus your mind. So one is schools are obviously closed. So the only way that learning will happen is primarily through self-study. What we find is self-study has declined, and you'll basically see that. So there is actually a stickiness between self-study and school. So as schools don't happen, self-studies also suffer. So self-study is not happening. That's sort of number one. Second is the digital and the television and the internet-based digital solutions that are being sort of developed through television and other media is actually not really being very effective, not being able to really replace, and it is actually not being effective the way it is being designed and the way it is being delivered. That is not to say that these things don't have promise. It is just to point to the fact the way it is being done right now, it is not very effective. And perhaps we need to think about other complementary interventions that are slightly more hand-holding oriented if we really want to compensate for the learning time loss that is really happening at this particular crisis point. I think that really is the kind of the sort of main argument that we'll make, but we'll get to the presentation right now. Just in terms of rules of engagement in today's meeting, first of all, please, of course, you're on mute. This is web, so we're going to, put you on mute while this is going on. Please use the Q&A option. We have a Q&A option here. So please use the Q&A option. And as the conversation is going, presentation is going on, I'll try and, collect them and categorize them and get back to them toward the end. You can also raise your hand, and that towards the end. You can raise your hand when I open up, and we can take some questions in that way. Just to let you know, we will also take questions after as well. So even after this webinar is over, you can still send your questions, and we will get back to you, and we will definitely use them in our subsequent studies, because one of the things we are doing is not doing a one-shot study, because these are very fast-moving realities we are living in right now. And it's really important to take a more of a monitoring-oriented approach to research here. And that's exactly what we will do as well. So any questions you may have, if you cannot, if you did not have time to put it here, or we did not get to you, please get back to us, and we will definitely incorporate them. We'll highly value your comments and your inputs. With that, I welcome you again, and I would now like to invite Professor Niyaz Asadullah for his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Imran, for the invitation and the opportunity to collaborate with BIGD on this very important topic. Before I start, let me also thank my team members, Anindita, Tasneem, and Farzin, who worked extremely hard to make this rapid response as possible in a very difficult time. I say it's a very difficult time because this crisis has affected everyone. Not just adults have been pushed out of the labor market, children have been locked out of school temporarily. But if we take into account the experience of countries that have gone through similar crises in the past, take for instance, Ebola in Sierra Leone, we have hard evidence to suggest that there can be long-term impact of this in terms of dropout, in terms of learning loss at school. But even if we reflect on the long-term consequences in terms of what will happen to the labor market, once again, there is evidence to suggest that instructional time disruption at school can lead to earning loss when children grow up and enter the labor market in the long run. But for Bangladesh, this, however, presents a much more difficult situation for the reason that even before the pandemic, we have a learning crisis in place where children are in school, but they're not learning. The gradient between schooling and learning is shallow. Time spent in school is not being rewarded in terms of gains in basic literacy and numeracy. And there are many reasons for this, but one that the evidence suggests is that of insufficient instructional time at school, as well as poor quality of that time for a variety of reasons: teacher absence, school closure, double shift, and so on. What many parents have done in Bangladesh is to therefore put in complementary private investment to make up for the learning time deficit in school. And they have done so again in a variety of ways by taking recourse to the shadow education market, hiring private tutors, sending children to coaching centers. At the same time, at home, parents take the role of teachers, engaging in homeschooling with children. And lately, there is this surge of EdTech. So the big context of this presentation is that while we are having this conversation, 40 million children are being locked out. The burden of education has been shifted from school to home. Teachers have been replaced by parents as the main agent to take care of children's well-being. The good news, however, is that the government has responded. The government has responded by offering remote learning opportunities for primary school children as well as secondary school children. So what we did in this research is really to have a deep, detailed look at the learning scape at home in Bangladesh, trying to understand what is happening to children when they're out of school. How are parents helping them? Are they being able to make up for the loss of learning at school by putting in compensatory investment, be it in terms of own time, be it in terms of higher time. And what about government intervention? To what extent it's also assisting children to compensate for time that they would have otherwise obtained if schools were open. So this is what motivated our research, and the 4 big questions that we asked are as follows. The first are 3 questions where we really wanted to learn better what's happening, what is the new learning scape during pandemic when children are at home for now over 3 months. How severe is the shock to learning time, including self-study time, including time spent in coaching center, or altogether time spent outside school in learning activities. Second, are children able to cope with school closure? Coping not just in terms of educational needs, but their mental health, their feelings of happiness. And third, are remedial measures working? Be it private, be it public. And lastly, what can government do more in terms of providing further support? And that critically hinges on taking stock of the extent of damage being done to instructional time broadly defined. And that is exactly where we focused on in this study. Okay, so as Dr. Imran was pointing out, this is not about teachers. This is not a study on schools. It is entirely about the demand side. It is really trying to open up the black box of educational production at home. Okay, and so far as the study design is concerned, we have focused on 2 broad themes. One is getting a sense of the effect of shock on 3 dimensions: learning time change, be it loss or gain, and second, non-learning time. What do children do outside studying while school remains closed? And lastly, what's happening to their well-being? Feelings of happiness. Is it a case of more learning with joy, or is it one of little learning and no joy? And lastly, the second block is where we focus on response, parental activism, and the social inequality in the way parents can assist children. In the same spirit, what are households doing differently exclusively for children's education to make them cope with the closure of school for the time being? And lastly, how are government measures working in terms of tele-based education? And what about digital solutions, internet-based education opportunities, and so on? Is it really about haves and not haves, not having internet connection and endowed with a laptop? Or is it much more than that? How much is technology being used among those who have it? So these are the broad themes that we have addressed in this presentation. The study, as a matter of fact, has much more, but for this presentation, this is what we are going to focus on. And again, just to sort of put this in context, this is a purely descriptive analysis. What we are doing is, in times of crisis, producing rapid evidence on key changes in central education parameters on the demand side. This is not a causal analysis. That is something we will plan to do later. And the presentation will focus exclusively on rural Bangladesh, although as Dr. Imran has clarified, we also have collected detailed data on urban slums. So this is a quick overview of the study design. So we reached out to close to 5,000 households and little over 5,000 children. And a unique aspect of our design is that this is a multiple respondent household, meaning that we not just interviewed children, we also spoke to their parents, particularly mothers. In terms of sample construction, this is a pro-poor sample because we felt that the pandemic is going to disproportionately affect the poor, and we should capture their educational struggle more. Having said that, we covered entire rural Bangladesh so far as the poor population is concerned, and we have covered also the major slums in urban area. So far as data collection method is concerned, we conducted a telephone-based survey because of social distancing requirement. And as for the questionnaire design goals, our key objective was to really detect early shift in key variables of interest. So therefore, what we did was to adopt a before-after comparison, asking respondents to give us data on a certain indicator at the present time, as well as before the school closure. And the main variable of interest in this presentation is the time use data, which could be collected in a multiple approach. We have adopted the activity prompt module for time use data collection. And the data was collected last month over 3 weeks. So who did we interview? Very briefly, we have a good mix of boys and girls. 75% of our respondents come from rural area. 34% of them are in primary school, but remember, these are corresponding to higher grades in primary school, primarily grade 4 and grade 5. What about the broad mix of institutional types? So again, we have 10% children who have attended Islamic schools, and another good 57% who went to non-government school. So therefore, we have a very good spread in terms of representing various categories of students in terms of where they go for their education. So as I mentioned earlier, the presentation has 2 parts. The first part is about quantifying the shock, the magnitude of disruption to instructional time, be it formal at school or be it outside school informal. So that is what we will focus on. And then we will move to the second part where we will talk about household responses and coping strategy. So before I tell you how things have changed, let me remind you the landscape, the learning landscape for the vast majority of rural Bangladeshi children. What was it like for them in an average day when schools were open? So this is how they would spend their time so far as education is concerned. So they would spend about 6 hours in school. And when they leave school, they would spend about 1 hour in coaching in outside home. Then they will spend about half an hour at home with a private tutor. And then they will spend another 3 hours at home self-study. So therefore, if you take these 3 things together, they represent what I call the household investment in education, above and beyond what happens at school. So we are talking about 6 hours at school, including travel time. And remember that these are strictly for children who are going to school, and another 4 hours outside school. So that is the learning landscape in terms of time spent by school-going children in rural Bangladesh. So this is what happened after the pandemic when schools system shut down. Okay, so as you can see, this blue bar literally collapsed from 360 minutes to 2 minutes, and that is not a surprise because schools are closed. What is surprising, however, is that this time that children spend on their own at home has also declined. Coaching center time has declined for a reason that they cannot go out, and equally, home tutoring time has also declined by 5-fold. So if we took into account these changes, it suggests that there has been this massive collapse in instructional time combined, be it at home or at school, after the pandemic. So we have moved from a regime where children would spend about 10 hours altogether in school, out of school learning, to as little as 2 hours, right? So this is what we want to build on next. So if they're not studying when schools are closed at home, what are they doing? What else are they doing outside study? And this is where we want to present to you data on non-learning activity time. So what we find is that there has been an increase in a number of categories after the pandemic. But once again, to remind you that even when school was open, Bangladeshi children in rural areas had to contribute to their household in a variety of ways, in terms of helping parents with household chores, doing a bit of work for the family's economic need. Beyond that, children would also spend 1 hour in play, in leisure time, and also 13 minutes helping out siblings with education, and then half an hour in religious activities. So this is how the distribution changed following the school closure. So household chore, time spent in household chore has doubled. Time spent for economic need, which is typically what we associate with child labor, has gone up. Recreational time has also gone up. Time spent helping children, siblings with education has remained unchanged, but time spent in religious activities gone up. But even when you take all these categories together, what you would probably notice is that these are not large enough changes to make up for the reduction in time spent in education at home. So what it means is that if we take the learning and non-learning time that children are now spending at home and compare it to what they were doing before the pandemic, we have a big change. So this is the total time children would spend before the pandemic at home. This is the part in education, be it in school, out school, and this is the part at home, close to 1 hour, helping parents with work, and then little over, close to 2 hours in other activities, recreational and religion. That distribution has radically changed to the extent that they're spending more time in non-learning activities. But what is striking is that this increase in non-learning activities is not large enough to compensate or account for what has happened in terms of instructional time. And this is a puzzle for us, and we plan to do more research on this. But for now, this is what comes out of our data, that 50% of waking hours, or close to 6 hours of time, cannot be captured by the 11 activity categories that we used in our research design. But what is certain, however, is that there has been this massive shift in time spent in learning activity away to other activities, be that documented or be that undocumented. Now, you might, however, notice that there is this green bar which corresponds to work. And even though it has gone up and it may not be large, but the welfare consequence of this can be much greater than what is shown in terms of our time measurement. So therefore, we want to probe further in terms of participation in child labor, for instance. And what we found was that if we disregard the number of minutes that they spent in child labor, and so just look at what proportion of them worked, we find that that has clearly increased, be that with household chores and be that helping parents economically. So therefore, we want to know what is the distribution, what is the change among children who have been helping parents a lot in terms of contribution towards household economic needs. And therefore, we focused on percentage of children working for more than 2 hours a day. And what we find is that even in this subgroup of children, there is this massive jump in participation in terms of 2 hours a day. 13-fold increase when it comes to household chores, and 4 times increase when it comes to economically gainful contribution to families' labor. So this is where I want to pause. So what we have found so far is that there is this collapse of private investment in education in terms of time that is dedicated to learning activities. At the same time, we see a sharp increase in non-learning activity. However, that rise is not large enough to make up for the loss of learning time. However, we want to sort of understand what's happening to the well-being of children. We understand that schools are closed. We understand that they're not studying much, but are they being well, mentally speaking, and taking into account their emotional state of mind? So for that reason, we also gather data retrospectively on children's mental health, asking them to report their emotions in 4 dimensions: positive emotions as well as negative emotions, feelings of happiness, feelings of being free from tension, at the same time negative emotions, feeling sad, feeling afraid. And this is the picture before the pandemic. Children are supposed to be happy, and they were happy. 87% said they were happy when schools were open. 73% said they were free of tension. Very few were depressed. So feelings of sadness, being afraid, very, very little. And this is how the distribution changed. Happiness score declined, tension-free population went down, but we then see movement in the opposite direction in negative emotions. A larger proportion of children are reporting that they're being sad, and there is 3 times increase among children who report being afraid. So this is implying that this is not just a learning crisis, it's also an emotional crisis. As schools remain closed, households are not able to take care of children emotionally. And there are broader challenges underlying the current education crisis. And therefore, what we want to know was to sort of understand in detail what is driving this process, how are households catching up, what are they doing differently to cope with this. So therefore, we want to understand what parents are doing differently. And we want to start with good parents and bad parents, parents who are capable versus who are not. And therefore, we compared learning time across different type of parents in terms of their differences in educational background, poverty status, and so on. What we find is that regardless of how we compare children across parental background, the gaps in terms of time that they spend in education are not large. So therefore, this is not just about parental background, but although it makes a difference. Nonetheless, we also want to know, what do parents do? What do good educated parents do differently to assist children? We do find that mothers participate more compared to fathers in assisting children with study at home. But what is surprising is that when it comes to modern solutions using technology, there isn't, it's not very popular. Only 16% children report that while school remains closed, they're using television for education purpose. And only 1% say that they're using online. Rather, we see much greater use of traditional coping mechanisms, engaging siblings, relatives to assist children with education at home. But nonetheless, we want to understand the technology perspective better. Perhaps educated parents, do it much better than uneducated parents. So therefore, we compared the uptake of television and online means for children's education purpose across parental groups with education and without education. So this is the distribution without education. So very little use of technology in families where both parents are uneducated versus a big rise in families where both parents are educated. But once again, these are not large. These are not large enough to explain away the very low level of time spent in learning activities at home. Nonetheless, we want to go further, and we looked at the divide in terms of access to technology. And what we find is that a good 38% in our sample don't have television. But among the 62% who have it, only 25% report to use technology. Okay? Now, what about internet? Only 30% households report that they have internet, but even among those who have it, only 2% use it. So therefore, it turns out that it's not just a matter of access. It's not about 38% in our sample not having a TV or 70% not having internet access. It is as much about low uptake. As a matter of fact, the underutilization of technology, be that television, be that online media, seems to be a bigger challenge in the context of Bangladesh. So therefore, we also ask children directly questions about usefulness of government initiatives to assist them with education as schools remain closed. We asked directly about 𝗗𝗿𝗄𝗆, a government television-based program dedicated to primary school children, as well as another program dedicated to secondary school children, asking respondent children, students in grade 4 to 10, whether they find these programs difficult. 42% say that they don't find these programs easy to follow. So, which means that it's a very large proportion that find the program difficult. Another 36% say that they find the program difficult. So what it means is that not just a very small proportion of children are using television-based programs to complement their study efforts at home. Among those who watch it, a high proportion also find it difficult to follow. So therefore, I've come to the last part of the presentation. So therefore, what we wanted to understand was the constraints that children and parents are facing while trying to cope with learning time loss as schools remain closed. And for that, we looked into a subgroup of children that we call resilient children. These are geeky children who love to study, who would study anywhere, be that school at home. So what we find is that in our sample, there is close to 13% children for whom there is an increase in learning time as schools shut down. And there is another 9% children who could somehow keep their self-study time constant, both before and after schools shut down. So this is the combined 22% children that we want to call resilient children, who managed to steady the boat in terms of keeping their study time at least constant. But even among that group, what is striking is that technology-based educational option, be that television, be that online, isn't very popular for reasons that we have explained. Rather, it's the traditional mode of assistance, be that from siblings, be that from father, be that from mother, that is much more significant compared to technology-based assistance for children at home. So that therefore takes me to the concluding part of the presentation. So as I conclude, what have we learned from this presentation? The big takeaway messages are four, but I should once again add a note of caution. This presentation is an outcome of rapid research. So we literally completed data collection last month, and the findings are preliminary. But if we take that as the true reflection of what's happening in Bangladesh, what the results are suggesting is a massive collapse of private investment in Bangladesh in education. That has been reflected in the non-response of self-study time compared to the time at school as well as at home children would spend when schools remain open. What therefore it also once again reminds us is what Dr. Imran pointed out, is the stickiness. Children spend more time at home when schools remain open. So study time at home is not a substitute for school time. The second takeaway message, which directly follows from this, is that because children are now for a long period of time not spending enough in learning activities at home, when schools open up, government faces a massive challenge. The challenge of recovery is not just to prepare teachers and schools. It is also the fact that children are returning unprepared with a long break in their educational experience. And the third point is that the crisis that we are witnessing is much more than digital divide. It is beyond access. It is beyond use of technology. And handle capability matters, but it is also beyond that. There are other broader constraints at play. And for that reason, therefore, while we see some evidence of uptake of government-run education program on television, which is certainly promising, but it is yet to become a source of advantage during a pandemic when schools remain closed. And the last point is that what we are seeing is that, across a wide range of socioeconomic groups, there is a collapse in investment time, in education in terms of time spent, but that does not mean that the pandemic is an equalizer in the context of education. Let's not forget that we have not captured the wealthier part of the urban population, where schools have managed to keep education online and undisrupted. So therefore, moving forward, this is a quick reminder to the audience about what is next in our pipeline. This is not the end of our project. This is just the beginning. We plan to track children during the whole pandemic, well into the next academic year, to understand how their instructional time loss or gain is evolving and how parental activism is changing. And using the data we have collected, we also want to conduct deeper analysis. Given that we have conducted a telephone survey, there are methodological challenges of compromised cognitive processes. Respondents are in stress. We are conducting a survey during a pandemic that can introduce bias. There can be measurement issues. In responses to all of that, we will look in great detail. We also want to understand better the nexus between well-being, poverty, and learning, trying to understand why parents are not responding to compensate children with learning time loss at home. And lastly, we also want to conduct more analysis by gender and also look into causal analysis within some of the variables that we have focused on. So far as our long-term objective goals, we want to go beyond loss of learning time. We want to also connect this to learning outcomes. We also want to inform the government by gathering data on school readiness. What can we do? How much do we know about school readiness, and what compensatory measures government can design based on this evidence? And lastly, we also want to explore whether we can develop and implement targeted EdTech interventions to assist not just children, but also their parents. Thank you very much. That's all from me.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Niaz. Can you? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Okay. Thank you very much. We really need to kind of try and see whether we can make up some time, because I think both me and you have not been very disciplined. Let's try to see as much as we can sort of cover up in terms of time. We have got 4. I don't know whether our DG sir has joined or not. Well, if he hasn't, then then
not yet. No.
Not yet. Okay. Hopefully he will. Okay, so I'd like to start off with 𝗗𝗍 𝗂𝗍𝗃, Executive Director Campaign, and actually I have a question to her, which is, of course you are you are basically looking at the whole sector, education sector in Bangladesh, especially the into working on the primary and mass education sector. So my question to you is, based on what you have heard, what do you think are some of the policy advocacy messages, and what is the policy advocacy agenda that you basically see that is emerging from this research? And any advice you have in terms of any further analysis, because this is just the beginning of the analysis we're doing, that we may do, it will be very helpful. Thank you. Rashida Appa, over to you.
অনেক ধন্যবাদ ইমরান সঞ্চালনা করছেন এবং যারা উপস্থিত আছেন মিডিয়ার বন্ধুরা এবং সম্মানিত প্রিয়ভাজন শ্রদ্ধাভাজন সবাইকে সম্মান জানিয়ে আমি শুরু করি। তবে শুরুতে যেহেতু আমরা একটা বিপর্যস্ত অবস্থার মধ্যে দিয়ে যাচ্ছি, আমরা এই সময়ে আমি একটু শ্রদ্ধা নিবেদন করব, আত্মার শান্তি কামনা করব যারা কোভিড-19 এর কারণে যাদেরকে আমাদের হারাতে হয়েছে, অনেক বড় বড় মানুষ, শিক্ষাবিদ, রাজনীতিক, চিকিৎসক, সংবাদকর্মী, সবার প্রতি সবার আত্মার মাগফিরাত কামনা করে আমি যদি বলি, আপনি আমাকে যে প্রশ্নটি করেছেন, আসলে এটা তো ঠিক এক কথা বা ওইরকম ভরে ছোট করে উত্তর দেওয়ার কিছু নেই। একটা বিষয় যেটা BIGD কে বিশেষ করে ধন্যবাদ দেব, যে হার্ড এভিডেন্স গুলো তুলে নিয়ে এসছেন, নিয়াজ আসাদুল্লাহ যেটা উপস্থাপন করেছেন। আমি তো বেসিক্যালি একজন অ্যাক্টিভিস্ট, আপনারা হার্ড এভিডেন্স নিয়ে আসেন, সেগুলো নিয়ে আমরা কাজ করি, সেজন্যই আপনি হয়তো প্রশ্নটা আমাকে করেছেন। আমরা এগুলা নিয়ে কাজ কিভাবে করব আগামীতে এবং এগুলা নিয়ে কি করা উচিত আমাদের ভাবা উচিত। কারণ যেটা হচ্ছে যে আপনি যেটা বলেছেন যে অ্যাডভোকেসি এজেন্ডাটা কি হতে পারে, প্রথম তো হলো যে আমাদের যে হাঁচটা ছিল যে বাচ্চাদের, প্রথম হলো যে লার্নিং লস তো হ্যাপেনিং, সবাই স্বীকার করেন, নীতি নির্ধারকরাও স্বীকার করছেন। দ্বিতীয় যেটা বাস্তবতা, আমরা আশঙ্কা করেছি বারবার যে আমরা সবার কাছে রিচ করতে পারছি না, এটিও প্রমাণিত হয়েছে আপনাদের এই গবেষণার মধ্য দিয়ে। তৃতীয় যেটি এসছে যে তাহলে এটি ডিভাইড কি বাড়ছে নাকি আরো বিষয়গুলা আমরা আমাদের আরেকটু ডিপে যেতে হবে। এবং সেখানে আরেকটা জিনিস যেটা ভালো লেগেছে সেটা হলো আপনারা যে এই মেন্টাল স্ট্রেসের বিষয়টা নিয়ে এসছেন। মেন্টাল স্ট্রেসটা তো নানাভাবে উদ্ভূত হচ্ছে এবং সেটা বাচ্চাদেরকে, আমাদেরকে, লার্নারদের, বিশেষ করে ইয়াং লার্নারদের, এই বয়সী লার্নারদের সাংঘাতিক রকম ভাবে এফেক্ট করছে। তারা কিভাবে সময় কাটাচ্ছে সেটা। এখন অ্যাডভোকেসি এজেন্ডা যদি করতে হয়, নিয়ে যেতে হয়, তাহলে আমাদের আরেকটু ডিপার অ্যানালিসিস, যেটা নিয়াজ ইতিমধ্যেই বলেছেন তার শেষ যে উপস্থাপনার স্লাইডটার মধ্যে তিনি বলেছেন যে ডিপার অ্যানালিসিসে আমাদের যেতে হবে। হার্ড এভিডেন্স আমরা পেলাম, তো হোয়াটস নেক্সট? ঠিক আছে, তাহলে যদি করতে হয় সেটা তো 3 দফা হতে হবে, 3 রকম। একটা হচ্ছে যে মাথায় রেখে প্যারেন্টস এবং লার্নারদেরকে মাথায় রেখে। কিন্তু এখানে আপনারা আবার আরেকটি বিষয়ের অবতারণা করেছেন, আফটার এই যে অ্যাসেসিং ইমপ্রুভিং যেটা বলেছেন, যে ডিপার অ্যানালিসিস, লঙ্গার টার্ম, অ্যাসেসিং লার্নিং লস আর ইমপ্রুভিং স্কুল রেডিনেস। এই জায়গাটাতে আমাদের একটা সুনির্দিষ্ট বক্তব্য থাকা উচিত স্কুল রেডিনেসের ব্যাপারে। আমরা তো আশা করছি এক সময় স্কুল আমরা খুলবো, তখন লার্নিং লসটা আমরা কিভাবে ক্যাচ আপ করবো সেটা জানতে গেলে ডিপার অ্যানালিসিস অবশ্যই লাগবে। দ্বিতীয়, আমরা কি শিক্ষকদের কথা ভেবেছি? তাদেরকে বাদ দিয়ে তো কোনো রেডিনেস হবে না, এটা একটা বড় গ্যাপ দেখতে পাচ্ছি। এমনকি নীতি নির্ধারণী পর্যায়ে পলিসি প্ল্যানিং এর মধ্যেও দেখতে পাচ্ছি শিক্ষকদের সাথে কেউ আলোচনা করছেন না। তো তাদেরকে বাদ দিয়ে আমরা কি করি? চিকিৎসকদের বাদ দিয়ে আমরা স্বাস্থ্য সুরক্ষা করতে পারবো না। শিক্ষা পুনরুদ্ধার যদি করতে হয় তাহলে শিক্ষকদের বাদ দিয়ে হবে না। এই জায়গাটাতে ডিপার অ্যানালিসিস আরেকটু দরকার, সম্ভবত আপনাদের রিসার্চের আরেকটু এক্সটেনশন দরকার, যে হাউ অ্যাবাউট টিচার্স। স্কুল রেডিনেস তো শুধু প্রাতিষ্ঠানিক অবকাঠামো না, অভিভাবক না, শিক্ষার্থী না, শিক্ষকরা একটা বড় সেখানে ভূমিকা পালন করে থাকেন। তাদের ব্যাপারটাও আরেকটু নিয়ে আসার জন্য তো অ্যাডভোকেসি এজেন্ডার মধ্যে আমি যেটা মনে করি যে একটা হচ্ছে আমাদের এটাকে বিস্তরণের জন্য, আজকে মিডিয়ার অনেক বন্ধুরা আছেন, হয়তো আমি এটা নিজেও স্বীকার করি যে আমি হয়তো পণ্ডিত না, বিশেষজ্ঞ না, যারা গবেষণা করেছেন ডক্টর নিয়াজ আসাদুল্লাহর মতো মানুষ, তারা অনেক একাডেমিক লেভেলে হাই থিঙ্কিং এ অনেক কিছু। আর একটু সহজ ভাষায় বাংলায় এটাকে একটু ছড়িয়ে দেয়া এবং বিস্তরণ করা, এটা একটা অ্যাডভোকেসি এজেন্ডা হওয়া উচিত। এবং দ্বিতীয় যেটা হলো, তাহলে আমাদের স্টেক হোল্ডার কারা হবেন সেখানে, কারা অংশীদার হবেন সেখানে, কাদেরকে আমরা টার্গেট করব? অবশ্যই নীতি নির্ধারকরা, সেখানে পার্লামেন্টের একটা ভূমিকা আছে, স্থানীয় সরকারের একটা ভূমিকা। আমরা যদিও ঠুটো জগন্নাথ করে রেখেছি স্থানীয় সরকারকে শিক্ষার ব্যাপারে, তারপরেও তাদের ভূমিকা আছে। এবং স্থানীয় প্রশাসন, শিক্ষা প্রশাসন বিশেষ করে আমি আশা করি যে তাদেরকে টার্গেট করে আমাদের যদি এই গবেষণার ফলাফলগুলোকে আমরা ছড়িয়ে দিতে পারি এবং তাদের সাথে আমাদের লবিগুলো চালিয়ে যেতে পারি, যে আমাদের যে বিষয়গুলো উঠে এসছে শিক্ষার্থীদের কাছ থেকে এই জরিপটির মাধ্যমে, এটা একটা মানে আমরা যে আশঙ্কাগুলো করেছিলাম যে বাচ্চারা কিভাবে সময় কাটাচ্ছে, তাদের মানে সোশ্যাল বিহেভিয়ার গুলো চেঞ্জ হচ্ছে কিনা, তাদের মেন্টাল স্ট্রেসটা বাড়ছে কিনা, এবং সেখানে রুটির ব্যাপারটা কিভাবে তাদেরকে প্রভাবিত করছে, এই বিষয়গুলোকে যদি আমরা সহজ ভাষায়, একটু বাংলা সহজ ভাষায়, আমি অনুরোধ করব আমাদের এইটাকে একটা বিশাল কিছু না, পলিসি ব্রিফ আকারে যদি আমরা নিয়ে যেতে পারি। রিসার্চের বড় ডকুমেন্ট থাকলো যারা আরো ডিপারে যেতে চান, কিন্তু একটা ছোট্ট পলিসি ব্রিফ করে আমরা যদি চলে যেতে পারি ডিফারেন্ট লেভেলস অফ স্টেক হোল্ডার্সদের কাছে, তাহলে এটা আমাদের কাজে লাগবে। বিআইজিটি কে আবারও ধন্যবাদ জানাচ্ছি, এটা আমাদের জন্য অনেক কাজে লাগবে। অনেক ধন্যবাদ।
থ্যাংক ইউ আসলে অনেক অনেক ধন্যবাদ। আসলে আপনি এই জন্যই আপনাদের সাথে কাজ করা। আমি মানে বিআইজিডি আমরা আসলে অ্যাডভোকেসি অর্গানাইজেশন না, আমরা গবেষণা প্রতিষ্ঠান। আমরা আসলে যত রোবাস্ট গবেষণা করা যায়, সে হাই কোয়ালিটি, সেটার উপরে আমরা একদম ফোকাস রাখতে চাই। কিন্তু অবশ্যই সেটা যেন গবেষণার প্রশ্নগুলো যেন নীতি নির্ধারণে সহায়তা করে, এরকম প্রশ্ন যেন আমরা গবেষণায় আনি। এবং তারপরে আপনাদের সাথে, আপনাদের মতো যারা অর্গানাইজেশন, যারা অ্যাডভোকেসি ওরিয়েন্টেড, তাদের সাথে আমরা কিভাবে মিলে এই গবেষণাকে আরো সহজভাবে নিতে পারি পলিসি ব্রিফ আকারে। এবং পলিসি ব্রিফ করলেই শুধু হবে না, আসলে এটাকে মানে বিস্তরণ, আপনি একটা শব্দ ব্যবহার করেছেন, বিস্তরণটা অত্যন্ত জরুরি। এবং এটার জন্য এটা একটা আলাদা একটা স্কিলসের আলাদা একটা প্রোগ্রামই অলমোস্ট। তো এটা নিয়ে অবশ্যই রাশিদ ভাই আপনার সাথে আরো আলাপ হবে। আমরা এই ব্যাপারে অত্যন্ত আগ্রহী, এটাকে কিভাবে করা যায়। এবং টিচারদের নিয়ে আপনি যে জিনিসটা বললেন, এটা আমরা মাথায় রাখবো। এই পরবর্তী নেক্সট যে আমরা তো যে বলছি এটাকে রিপিট করতে চাচ্ছি আমরা, সেই মানে তখন এই জিনিসটাকে আমরা অবশ্যই মাথায় রাখবো। আমি এখন
একটা অনুরোধ করি ইমরান, একটা অনুরোধ করি, আমাদের নন বাংলা স্পিকিং যারা, তাদের কাছে আপনার প্রশ্নটা আর এটা একটু যদি বলেন, একটু বাংলিশ ইউজ করেন।
রাইট ওকে না, থ্যাংক ইউ না, আপনি বাংলায় বলছেন রাশেদা, তো আমি ভাবলাম আমি মনে বাংলায় উত্তরটা দেই।
আমি খেয়াল করিনি, সরি।
Right, it's okay. So at this stage, I would like to invite, actually, because we're talking about research. So maybe I will invite our colleague from Brac Institute of Education and Development, Dr. 𝗵𝗵 𝗡𝗵, Assistant Professor BIED. And I think what I would really like to hear from him, of course, BIED is the premier institution and Brac University, which is focused on educational research. What we did is, primarily as social scientists, we looked at this whole question from a more social science perspective, but there are very specific educational perspectives here in terms of, what this means for pedagogy, what this means for curriculum development, and so on and so forth. And some people are talking about that this may actually be an opportunity for, innovations in terms of on the pedagogy front as well. So I would love to hear from Dr. 𝗗𝗵 about those kind of thoughts. Please, Dr. 𝗗𝗵, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Imran, and thank you to BIGD for taking this initiative, and Professor Niaz and his team for this very insightful research. I think this has opened a door to many discussions and insightful discussions on this topic. So talking specifically about the pedagogy, and as we relate this research from it, I think from a curricular perspective, there are some very important take-ons from this research. First, we have seen the self-study has become the primary study method, although the self-study itself has decreased from the face-to-face class time, but still self-study is the dominant method. And I think we have to think in a long term, given this type of situation may prolong, how we develop a curriculum that helps build learners as more independent learner, as more of a learner who can do metacognitive things, think metacognitively, can take charge of their own learning, can study independently. So that's sort of from a pedagogic perspective, that might be something is very important for us to look at. Second thing is the crisis. If we look at the crisis, we are struggling to find out a way how to respond to this. So schools are closed, learning is not happening, teachers are not finding an effective way to communicate with students. And if you look at the data, we are seeing that students are doing a lot of things, but there is no mention of teachers. So what they're doing with the teacher in this time, they are doing household chores, they're helping in economic activities, they're helping their parents, they're doing religious activities, sports, but what about their interaction with their teachers? Maybe even in a phone or other social interactions. So the relationship between teacher and student may need to be revised, rethought, and how we look at learning itself, like the one-way teaching learning. So these are the areas we need to think. The third is the centralized way our curriculum is designed. We have a lack of rigid curricular structure, and that is what has made disseminating a one-channel learning throughout the country difficult. I think from a curricular perspective, we need to go to a more flexible and agile curriculum structure that is geared to the needs of specific population, and that can actually sustain locally. There can be centralized discussions or centralized frameworks, but learning can sustain locally with the help of local community, with the help of local educational authorities that Rashida was also emphasizing. So a sort of sustained, flexible, agile curricular structure, and also developing the capacity of the system in the education, like our ministries and our education bodies that works in local or district level, developing their capacity to respond to this sort of flexible, agile curricular needs, I think has to be addressed. Definitely, we have been seeing some efforts in promoting online or television-based pedagogies, and it has kind of, mixed outcomes. There has been some progress, but there is still way more avenues to make much more progress. So this is going to be an important area, how we develop blended learning, or how we cash on more this blended or online learning, given, the poverty and other aspects, how we can be very targeted towards it, primarily reaching at first step, primarily reaching the students who are at most risk. And then, strategizing our targets and interventions so that online platform itself does not become a dividing tool. So not just a blanket or one-size-fits-all blended learning, a very targeted, specific, segregated blended learning is needed. Looking at the data, I was thinking perhaps how does the finding can be disaggregated in terms of gender, like how does boys and girls faring up, and how like the urban slum, children from urban slum, how they are doing. Also looking at a grade specific data, like we have in this research data from grade 4 to grade 10. Now, if we closely look at it, there are some sort of differences because there are children who are at grade 5 who are supposed to go to grade 6 next year, entering a different curricular, different education system, different sort of schools. And look at grade 10 as well. They are also supposed to go to grade 11. Many of them might be thinking of entering labor market. So we perhaps need some sort of research on those specific targeted areas, disaggregated by grade, gender, that can help us devise better educational plans and help target our interventions more specifically for them. So in a nutshell, there's also some interesting findings. We have seen sports, recreation activities has gone up, religious, spiritual activity has gone up, mental health has gone down. What's happening? What's happening there? So why we are creating more opportunities for sports, but still it's bringing down the well-being. And at this point, I think a crucial part of pedagogy would be well-being, like how we ensure well-being with quality. And looking at this sort of dynamics might help us design a better curriculum in future. So thank you. I think I have talked enough. And these are some of the pedagogy and curricular aspects I can think of. But thank you very much for this opportunity. It's a very eye-opening research. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. 𝗏𝗏. You know, I really hope, because some of the points that you raised, I hope we'll have an opportunity to discuss. And I really hope that BIED, you know, as the kind of the institute that really has got these domain expertise in terms of some of these areas, absolutely critical areas that you mentioned, which I think our study just kind of points some direction toward. This really requires far more domain specific, I think, unpacking and work. I think that's exactly where I hope BIED will sort of pick this up. I'm very much aware that BIED is very much involved in this whole well-being idea, especially in the earlier age group. And I think the psychological support aspect and the mental health and well-being is emerging as a very, very important area. But exactly how we address this is something that, you know, I think I would really hope that BIED will be kind of really driving this, and in any support that or any collaboration that we can enter into in that space would be really, really useful. But I think you raised some really, really important points, like the importance of agile curriculum. I mean, what should the curriculum be? I mean, we've seen in tertiary education, in university education, there has been some adjustments in terms of the grading and the exam system. You know, how will we do this for the sort of you know, kind of upper primary and secondary education? I think you know, I think that would require a lot of thinking. And how do we do it in a way that does not signal adverse labor market outcomes in the future as well? So I think there are very important balancing things that we need to do, and important conversations to be had here. So thank you very much for raising all of that. I'd finally like to move to Dr. 𝗏𝗏 𝗚𝗏, Director of Brac Education. So my question to you, Shoufiq Bhai, is obviously about, you know, what Brac is doing, but in a more specific way, I think Brac has always been a pioneer in terms of you know, social innovations and thinking very creatively about you know, both the, you know, technology and social science part, because I think one of the reasons why many of these digital technologies or digital solutions are not really delivering, you know, having the kind of intended effects and uptake is basically because the social science part of it and the community dynamics and the household dynamics part of it and the rural dynamics part of it or poverty dynamics part of it is not fully understood. And Brac has always been a pioneer in terms of ensuring that you know, we are taking technology, but at the same time we are adapting it in our context, in our sociological context. So from that perspective, I'd really be very interested to hear from you what Brac is thinking and what Brac is doing, especially on this sort of combining technology with sort of more community-based approaches and solutions, more hybrid approaches. Thank you, Shafiq Bhai.
Imran Bhai, thank you. And thanks to Niaz for the wonderful presentation. And congratulations, Imran Bhai, to BIGD for undertaking research in this time, and particularly on this very important subject. It's really a deserving congratulation. Imran Bhai, I will get back to your answer, but before that, allow me just to have 1 or 2 observations on this wonderful investigation research that has been done. I somehow missed a bit the disaggregation of data when Niaz was talking about this whole learning time, the self-study. So that could be, you know, giving us some more insight. So is there any difference between the girls and boys when this self-learning issue is coming? Is there any difference between the grade 8, 10 and grade 4 children? Because we know that our education system is so closely kind of sensitively aligned to the exam. So that's why I am fingering on grade 8, 10 and 4. So 4 would be giving a very different comparison. While I was not at all surprised that this kind of, you know, non-learning has gone up. Now, Imran Bhai, Niaz Bhai, just think of that our education system, unfortunately, particularly at the basic education level, both primary and secondary, for different reasons, becomes so much textbook oriented. So this whole habit of reading beyond textbook remains an area to be carefully looked into. And that is I do not know how to formulate it. It's a habit issue or a much deeper issue close to cultural issues. Now think of your sample population, majority of whom came out very well in non-literate environment and the literate environment differences that we foresee. So for that reason, I am telling that I was not surprised that children have a lot of plenty time. They do not know what to do with this time. And the societal infrastructure is missing. Now, I remember my childhood. Each neighborhood used to have a small library, the para library. So even if a child wants to read, where to go? So that is an area that pandemic really brought, for me, is an area really to think through and further. And I would be requesting Niaz Bhai and Imran Bhai perhaps to look into it carefully. And I was very happy, Niaz Bhai, that you started with Ebola. So if I look into that, what we have learned from Ebola. Now, the gap between Ebola and the COVID, if you take this time factor, and if you take that what the policymakers learn from it, so what will happen if a similar things happen in 5 years? So when you are talking of next step and deeper analysis, I would be definitely requesting you to look into those things that what would be happening if it happens in 5 years again. So I agree with the agile curriculum, but agile curriculum would be agile if it creates a social infrastructure in the society, which is a learning friendly and thinking friendly environment. So let us not be over-focusing the education to the systemic, traditional systemic learning domain, because that is one of the problems that perhaps we are consciously driving to. Now, the other thing I was requesting for the deeper analysis, which when you do next, under you next, Bangladesh essentially, despite the penetration of the phone, and this is a basic phone we are talking, is a low-tech context, particularly when you relate it to the education, whether it is a teacher's development, whether it is a truly beyond classroom learning space creation. And I agree fully, Imran Bhai, with you, that no technology can substitute the classroom and school-based learning. And I fully agree on that front also. The technology itself will not solve the problem unless we find the good supplementary hand-holding solution. And that good, to me, has to be an innovative one, and really looking for that what is the lessons that we are having from all the crises, starting from Ebola and here. Now, Imran Bhai, coming to the question that you have asked me to answer. The context, now if you look into the Bangladesh context, and one of the problematic area I find, Niaz Bhai, I'm sorry for this, in this whole study, the whole investment issue. Whether you talk of pre-COVID or whether you talk of during COVID, which would be hopefully leading us in the next financial year to a post-COVID, our investment commitment to education remain virtually no change. So when we are talking of a generation educating and is at the risk of learning, and how do we really make a act on it? One demonstration could be, as a citizen, I expected higher education for the education and health, but in a smarter way, because that's a very important one, that investment done in a smarter way. And that is the biggest problem, Imran Bhai, that I see. Now, also in your study, you see the whole parental investment pattern. It is so closely associated with our social infrastructure, the societal systems. Now, we need an increased investment on education, but we have to be very kind of lesson learned orientation so that we get a good investment. And to me, Imran Bhai, the low investment solutions is a big problem itself. And this is one of the challenges that we are facing in Brac. And particularly when the country is in a much deeper kind of challenge that people would be losing their livelihood. The whole nutritional domain. Are we going to really allow a generation to grow in ill health? Can we afford it as a nation? Now, with an empty stomach, with a even very good planning of reopening the school, how long the children would be able to learn and what kind of learning would be sustained? I am really worried that unless we have really a collective effort to draw the attention of the policymakers on that, we may end up with not an expected situation that the country would be really expecting. Now, and I'll be finishing here. What our experience is, people in this country, particularly when you think even at the rural poor, they respond. And the home school solution that we from Brac initiated, and that is another area, Imran Bhai, Niaz Bhai, I would be requesting that extend your kind of sampling and the scope of investigation, also to go beyond the TB and the formal solution that is happening in terms of learning. Because the innovations are taking place, other responses are coming out. And from Brac, we started a very low-tech solution, but targeting particularly those who are excluded from the TB-based solutions, high-tech solutions. So thank you. It was a wonderful work, very eye-opening, And I'm sure that the country will be getting a lot of benefit. And I, as a citizen, particularly looking forward for your deeper analysis on the learning loss and to also, how to benefit from your future learning loss analysis. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Shaufiq Bhai. I think you raised a number of very, kind of important policy level question with respect to investment. I mean, of course, there's so many, this is obviously a complex domain, and there are issues of, budgetary investment. I mean, in this study, we deliberately wanted to keep our focus on something that is a bit sharp, which is really to understand what is happening within the household with respect to children's learning time. And of course, this has implication for, the sort of budgetary, allocation, investment, and design. I think most importantly, what we are interested in is in the design of intervention. So I think what we are basically saying is that the digital approach and only focusing on trying to make the digital approach effective by focusing on digital divide is not enough, right? There are other types of barriers, and this is an opportunity, and this opportunity for it to really work, we need to really think about, more handholding and other types of, kind of solutions, community-based approaches in combination with the technological approaches. And I think it's a combination, it's a hybrid approach is what would be really, really needed. And that hybrid approach would also mean multi-actor oriented approach where government policies and NGO innovations basically come together. I think without that, we cannot really, and be it in health, we have been talking about in health, and we are yet to see that happening, even in education crisis, even in social safety net. I mean, it is the same story over and over again. And the story is this: we have to rely on what is our core strength in the context of Bangladesh, and that is our community-based innovative approaches. That remains to be our fundamental core strength. And if we can really use that to do our testing, tracing, and all of that treatment in health, if we can use that to identify, who we should be providing social assistance to and economic stimulus to, and also using that also to figure out how we are going to really ensure that digital, innovations in education actually, kind of reach and are sort of working for first generation learner, households and other types of household constraints. I think then we can really, we can basically, have something more effective. There are a number of questions that basically came. I've been trying to answer most of them, on the Q&A, but I think I'll just ask a few to Niyaz and maybe Anindita, who is also from BIGD side, the co-PI working with Niyaz on this. So I think there's been a number of questions around heterogeneity, right? I mean, I know that we did a number of, kind of basic heterogeneity analysis, and you have plans to do more. And I think we have generally found that, at least in these early stages, many of this heterogeneity, we don't really see much to really talk about in terms of heterogeneity. But maybe Niyaz, you want to talk about heterogeneity a bit?
Thank you. So there is one unique part of our study design. It's a study that was designed precisely to capture gender dynamics. So what we have done is to capture two types of households. Households where children only belong to one gender category, either it's all boys households or all girls households. We also captured the mixed household, where there is a brother and sister going to school at the same time. So what we plan to do as part of our heterogeneity study is to sort of see how the time use pattern and how the care received from parents are varying depending on the gender composition of siblings. And we have, for the time being, looked into gender difference. And what we find is that so far as non-learning time is concerned, there is a bigger spike in household chores among girls, and then the spike is bigger in child labor among boys. But when we look into the overall distribution of time spent in learning activities, the gender gap isn't big. So that again confirms the narrative that I presented before you. No matter how we cut the data, whether it's by parental background, whether it's by children's background, there are gaps, but the gaps are nowhere close to make up for the big collapse that we have seen in the data in terms of total time spent in learning. So Anindita, you might want to add, if you like, to this, but that is what I felt was worth highlighting at this point. Again, to put this in context, we have plans to look in great detail, not just, by the way, to look at how the patterns are differing by gender composite of the household, but also look for cross-gender effect, meaning that our daughters being more supported by mothers and sons being more supported by father. Thank you.
Anindita, do you have anything?
Yeah. Not much, but yeah, as 𝗍𝗃 already pointed out that, only in terms of like time spent in household chores and for like paid economic activity, we see a slight difference for girls versus boys. But yeah, again, when we look at the time spent on self-studies, the decrease for both groups, like when you take girls as a whole versus boys, it's the same. There's like a 1 minute difference in how much it went down. So yeah.
One of the heterogeneity point that was, I think, a number of people raised even in the question, it has to do with the grade. Because there's certain grades where, one would expect more self-study than in other grades. Do you find anything in terms of the grade differences, or have you not looked at that?
We haven't yet analyzed specifically by grades, but we did compare between like primary and secondary group. But again, the difference wasn't much big. We do plan on doing like more grade-wise analysis and see if anything comes up.
I think there are certain grades like grade 5 or grade 4, and then.
But what we find for now is that secondary school kids spend more time, but that's reflective of the fact that also in school they have a longer hours compared to primary. So that
I think the general message that we want to give is that this is we finished the survey as over 9,000 household surveys, so telephone survey. It's been really, I think, really we have to congratulate the team who pulled this off. I mean, this is Herculean task to do a survey of 9,000, over 9,000 respondents and matching them, and doing this, time use survey. So we did this one month, and then we did some, the analysis that we did is still very preliminary, as Niyaz also said. So our first cut on the heterogeneity side is we don't really see anything that really stands out. The only thing that we see really stands out in terms of driving some of the result is this parental education. And we've talked about that. But there may be others. We will get deeper into some of the more other types of heterogeneity. And in the full report, which we will be working on now, over the next few weeks, we will definitely look at other heterogeneities and sort of cross effects and things like that. So so thank you very much who raised a question on the heterogeneity side. There was another question. This has got to do with the missing time, and I think the missing time is a very interesting, kind of from a methods point of view, because it basically says that there's something really around the notion of time in a crisis, which to capture it properly, perhaps we need to really think about methods a bit more carefully. That, the way we measure time or do a time use survey in peacetime, in a normal time, and the way the notion of time perhaps also changes during crisis is perhaps different, and we need to think about that. So there's quite a lot of missing time that you haven't been able to account for. Any hypothesis, Niyaz, in terms of what may actually be happening here?
So there are a couple of hypotheses. So one is that, in times of crisis, people are stressed. There is a shortened attention span. We are conducting the interview over phone. Telephone service also have its own fair share of bias. The phone may be not owned by the respondent. The respondent might be, in distress, in a rush. And also the fact that we are not using a 24-hour recall method. Instead, we are using an activity prompt approach. This can lead to an overestimation of time spent when school was open. And therefore, proportionately, give an estimate of time reduction, which is bias upward. So we have some design provisions in the survey to explore some of these sources of biases. There are supplementary questions in place precisely to address methodological concerns to do with measurement, which is again part of our deeper analysis plan.
Okay, thank you. I think I got a response. So Rashida, I think there's a question that you wanted to answer.
Should we invite questions from participants, or?
We could do that. I mean, because there are a lot of questions. Actually, the questions that I asked are questions from participants. So Rashida, I think a question that you.
Thank you. বিশেষ করে thanks to the participants, because they are quite engaged and I suppose quite absorbed, because they asked some questions about the teachers also, where the gap, and the question about gap between government and non-government teachers. We know at the secondary level it is so, এত প্রকট একটা ডিভাইড আছে সেখানে গভর্নমেন্ট এন্ড নন গভর্নমেন্ট টিচারদের মধ্যে। সেখানে আমরা বোধহয় 2-3 দিন আগে 15 টিচার অ্যাসোসিয়েশনস, 15টি শিক্ষক সংগঠনের 42 জনের সাথে বসেছিলাম। এই প্রশ্নটার উত্তরে বলতে চাই, তারা যেটা বলেছেন যে আমরা তো বেশি সংখ্যায় মারা যাচ্ছি না, বেশি সংখ্যায় মারা গেলে হয়তো খবর হতো, এরকম আক্ষেপ করে তারা কথাটা বলেছেন। এবং সেখানে আরেকটা জিনিস তারা বলেছেন যে সমন্বয়হীনতা, lack of coordination within ministries, because it's not only about teachers but also about local government, also about health ministry. That's what is about. But they were very, very frustrated about nobody is taking into account their capacity building. We are talking about the digital divide, but the divide between the teachers. So the question is all about the gap between teachers, government and non-government. The digital divide is also happening among them. It's not only about infrastructure or connectivity issues, but access. That is also becoming an issue, and it's becoming costly because of the recent, online expenses in the finance bill-এর মধ্যে যেটা নিয়ে আসা হয়েছে, সেটা নিয়ে তারা খুব ওয়ারি। কাজেই এখানে দুটো জিনিস তারা একটা সাজেস্ট করেছেন, যে তারা এটাও বিক্ষোভ খুবই আক্ষেপ করে বলেছেন যে শিক্ষক কর্মচারী জনবল কাঠামো নাকি রিভিউ করা হচ্ছে শিক্ষকদের বাদ দিয়ে। এই জিনিসটা যে they are not part of the deliberation or not part of the discussion or discourse. That is very frustrating for the teachers. And there are many other issues that came in what they have said, but some of the teachers, the other question about whether teachers are doing anything, some of the teachers proactively, spontaneously started their own, those who have the capacity, own online teaching, and even connecting with the parents using the stipend mobile phone numbers. I am talking about the rural teachers. They have also started. So maybe the next step for BIGD could be to have a survey of teacher association or teachers, maybe, because that would give you some kind of understanding of this particular pillar of education, the teaching community, the teaching profession, how they are being affected in this particular scenario, and how they could be of help in future after reopening of schools or before reopening, and keeping in mind the digital scenario, which is going to change everything in, particularly in education. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rashida. I think there are some hand raised. I'm very aware that we have finished our 1.5 hour. So maybe we'll just take another 10 minutes in case there are hands raised. I can't really see the hand raised from here for some reason. So somebody would need to help me. I think there is Mr. 𝗗𝗿 There's a hand raised from Mr. 𝗗𝗿. So we would like to, but please keep it really brief.
Yeah, sure. So my name is 𝗏𝗏 I am working in DFID. So Niyaz, I know him very well. We studied in the same university in Aligarh. So congratulations, Niyaz, for such a wonderful study that you have carried out. I think the study has really raised a few kind of questions or few concerns that the government need to look into. What government is currently doing and what government will be planning to do in the coming months is that we can clearly see that the access to TV, the percentage of access to TV and the percentage of using the TV, I mean, there is a big difference. So even student or children has access to TV, but not necessarily they are using TV. For example, like the lessons that broadcasting to TV. So why they are not accessing not using the TV in terms of their education. And also there is a difference between educated parents and not educated parents in terms of using the TV classes. So I think that's need to be further dig out and to see why this is happening. The other thing is that children having difficulties in terms of learning by using TV, and that's a significant number. So then the lessons need to be, government need to think how the lessons need to be more effective and useful so that children can easily learn through TV. And even though those who are even understanding the lessons in TV, it is important to know how much they're really learning. I mean, maybe I don't know how to make sure or how to get a kind of understanding, what is the level of understanding, how far they're learning. So this is also maybe we need to think about. And it is also important to know that I think the urban context must be definitely different. If we do the similar kind of survey in the urban context, that will also be very interesting to see the rural-urban divide and how these are, and that will trigger a lot of issues that the government may would like to consider when and they'll be implementing and designing their response plan for COVID-19. So yeah, I mean, that's all from my side. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. 𝗘𝗶. I think those were a very important point. Just to let you know, we have an urban module that's very much part of the analysis, but it's an urban slum. So we're not. So we do not have urban, better off household where the inequalities that one would expect, it's not really coming true if you compare just rural, even middle class or upper middle class with sort of urban slum. But we're obviously, we're repeating this. And one of the other things that to keep in mind is that a lot of this, two things to keep in mind. One is this is an early effect. So a lot of this heterogeneity may not show as yet. As we monitor, and we want to do at least 2 more rounds of this survey over the next 3 months or so. So we definitely want to monitor this. And I think a lot of those, heterogeneity may actually, reveal itself over time, because this is very early effect. That's one thing to keep in mind. So just because we don't see heterogeneity doesn't mean that, it doesn't exist. It's just maybe it's too early on. The second thing that I just want to basically mention is that I know there's a lot of interest in terms of all kinds of things you want us to look at, but please remember this is a full survey. It's a half an hour. We cannot expand more than half an hour. There's a boundary condition, and we really have to be extremely focused. So there's only a few things that can really look at. We hope that we are generating ideas and thoughts which others will basically pick up, and that's the whole point. That's not to do one survey or one institution doing everything on a particular agenda, but to spearhead and to really generate new types of interest and questions. That is the whole purpose here. Great. I think there is another.
Arekta question আছে Nandita, please.
I can see. Thank you very much. I think Nandita, I think you're from DFID as well. Please go ahead. Nandita, we can't hear you.
Yes, I finally got the option to unmute myself. Hello, Imran Bhai and hi, hello everyone. So I'll keep it very, very short. So I think there is a threshold for unemployment, like the scarring effect of unemployment. After 6 months, you're no longer considered unemployed. So is there a critical threshold after that level that kids who hasn't gone to school for say 6 months or something, they're considered that they will not come back to school ever? Is there something that can help us identify what will be the number of dropouts? Yes. And thank you so much for the research.
Sure. Thank you. I will ask Niyaz to answer that question, but let me just take somebody else. Anwara Begum. You're on mute.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum. Imran bhai, thank you very much. And I would like to congratulate Niyaz for his very good presentation, as well as the two panelists who spoke, especially Mrs. Rashida 𝗗𝗄𝗏. My question is to Niyaz. Is it possible to induce our policymakers to make our teachers more technologically savvy because we know that in the near future, the only way to reach these children is through technology, the internet. So can we make our teachers more technologically savvy, number one, make our SMC members more inclusive in their outlook, so that communities will chip in into the schools. You have different ways of getting the technological into the schools, as well as reaching these girls and boys, so that they learn some online courses which will equip them for the labor market, and they will get accreditation for that, so that they get motivated to utilize their time. Even parents will get motivated thereby. So this is my this is my position, that we need to look ahead. We must not rely on the age-old way of imparting education.
Yeah. Thank you.
Education must link to the labor market, employment, so that in the long run, parents and students are motivated. Thanks.
Right. Okay. Thank you. I think that's great, and I think it's absolutely right. I think what you said, I don't think we're disagreeing with that. Maybe Niyaz may have some thoughts. Niyaz, do you want to answer both the question, but in particular?
Very briefly, to respond to the question from Dr. Anwara, that the government should equip teachers more with technology, and train them better in digital literacy, whether it's possible. I think many things are possible. The problem is, as Rashida 𝗗𝗏 was pointing out, is that the government isn't yet prioritizing education. So when the government is ready, many things are possible. So, so as we speak, public investment in education remains low. Parents are struggling to cope by putting in their own money, and that hasn't been enough in times of pandemic. And we have an education system where teachers are not resilient because past investment in technology did not go into teachers. It went into machines, hardware. So that is where the, I think a blind spot is, that the government has to focus on students and teachers in a way that expand their capability, and not on infrastructure alone. So right now there is this single focus on infrastructure, on procurement, on computerization, on building classrooms. But as Rashida 𝗗𝗏 was again pointing out, that in the entire discussion on how to recover from this crisis in the education sector, we are bypassing teachers. We are not just bypassing teachers, we are also marginalizing learners and parents. I think these are two critical groups that need to be brought in. The other question, which is also connected to what Nandita points out, the labor market connection. And I am really fearful that when the economy starts to reopen, while schools remain in lockdown, it is going to increase demand for child labor. And the worry that you have about heterogeneity, that the gaps that we don't see right now in non-learning time will emerge in coming months. So again, so BIGD and us together, we are aware of these risks, and we are prepared to present before government the evidence, but we don't have to wait for evidence. These are real risks. And I think we need to be more proactive. 𝗗𝗵𝘃 has been campaigning for a long time. And I think this is an opportunity where we need to stand together, bring in hard evidence, make the task of campaigners easy. And I think this is where the focus really have to shift away from hardware to software. Thank you.
Thank you, Niyaz. I think that really kind of sort of summarizes, I think, in terms of what we really want to do next. As sort of Niyaz said, we are in the business of kind of generating evidence, and as high quality and as rigorous and as evidence as we can possibly generate. We're going to be really focused on that from a social science perspective. We hope that the work we're doing and we want to do in this space will also create a spillover effect, and there would be an ecosystem of other evidence organizations, to sort of take on other questions which we may not be able to answer because of all kinds of limitations, and then together we work with evidence to policy and evidence to advocacy organizations and coalitions such as 𝗗𝗵𝘃 to sort of kind of try and keep on pushing the frontier, keep on kind of throwing light and insight and evidence to the issue, and also solutions. And I think this is the other part we are also very aware of, and we are talking to Brac and also to basically see whether we can also be involved in terms of kind of actual intervention evaluation as well, so that we can quickly come up with interventions that are effective in this kind of context, so that they can actually be kind of taken forward. Because as I said, I think what is really required is a multi-actor oriented horizontal vertical linkage solution, and I think that's how Bangladesh has progressed, and that's exactly how we are going to also kind of progress and sort of address some of the challenges that this crisis imposes on us. We still don't see a lot of sort of movement in that respect, but I think we need to keep on pushing, and that's all we can do. So thank you all very much, and we'll be in touch with you. The presentation is going to be on our website. The full report we're going to be working on, and also thinking about kind of subsequent surveys, and we are also going to be trying to raise resources to ensure that we can continue this piece of work. So thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well done, whole team, BIGD team.
So
thank you.
We really look forward to working with
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.